Hello, boring dreamers. Today we are going to ruin your favorite fantasy. We aren't going to the medieval Europe of shiny knights, damsels in velvet, and clean stone castles. We are going to the real medieval Europe, a place where the mud is 3 feet deep, the sun is a vague concept, and the average life expectancy is good luck. We are going to wake up in a house that is trying to kill us, eat food that fights back, and try to navigate a world where a sneeze is basically a death sentence. Honestly, you probably won't survive this, statistically speaking. You'll be dead by Tuesday. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you are watching from and what time it is. I love seeing the timestamps roll in from the future. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes, or at least you try to. Your eyelids are glued shut by a crusty, sticky substance that formed overnight. You rub them with a knuckle that feels like a raw potato, and you blink into the darkness. It is morning, but you wouldn't know it. It is pitch black. You are lying on a sack of straw that hasn't been changed since the harvest. It is damp, lumpy, and moving slightly beneath you. That movement isn't a ghost. It's the ecosystem of fleas, lice, and beetles that call your mattress home. You are the heated buffet for 1,000 tiny legs. You try to take a deep breath to start your day, but you immediately choke. Your throat constricts. You cough a deep, rattling, wet cough that shakes your entire rib cage. You spit out a glob of gray phlegm onto the dirt floor. Welcome to the medieval morning. You are suffering from chronic smoke inhalation, and you haven't even lit the fire yet. You are lying in a hall house or a simple peasant crock-frame cottage. It is essentially a basket woven of wood and mud, wattle and daub, with a thatched roof. It is charming in a painting, but in reality, it is a windowless box. Glass is a luxury for cathedrals and kings. If you cut a hole in the wall for light, you let in the freezing wind. So, you live in the dark. But the darkness isn't the problem. The air quality is. In the center of the room is the hearth. It is an open fire pit. There is no chimney. Chimneys are high-tech luxury items that won't become common in peasant homes until the late Tudor period, centuries from now. So, where does the smoke go? Ideally, it drifts up and filters out through the thatch roof, killing the bugs in the straw. Realistically, it hangs in a thick, suffocating cloud about 4 feet off the ground. You are living inside a smoker. You are the brisket. This is a mainstream historical fact. Paleopathologists examining medieval skeletons often find the sinuses are riddled with chronic infection, and the ribs show signs of lung disease. The average medieval peasant had the lungs of a heavy chain smoker, despite never touching a cigarette. They spent their winters sealed inside a small, unventilated room with a burning wood fire. The soot coated everything: the walls, the food, and the insides of their bodies. You are slowly curing yourself like a ham. You sit up, keeping your head low to stay under the smoke layer. You feel a warm, moist breath on your neck. You turn around. A goat is staring at you. It bleats right in your face. It smells of wet wool, ammonia, and decay. You aren't just sharing this one-room hut with your spouse and your 6 children. You are sharing it with the farm. The cow is tied up in the corner. The pigs are rooting around near the door. The chickens are roosting in the rafters, pooping on you from above. This is the longhouse arrangement. In a world without central heating, animals are biological radiators. A cow puts out a lot of BTUs. On a freezing February night in England or France, hugging a pig might be the only thing stopping you from freezing to death. It's cozy in a disgusting barnyard sort of way. You swing your legs out of bed. You are wearing the same wool tunic you wore yesterday, and the day before, and the week before that. You sleep in your clothes because it is cold, and because undressing takes effort you don't have. The wool is scratchy, greasy, and smells of wood smoke and sweat. You step onto the floor. It is dirt, just packed earth. Over the years, layers of spilled ale, animal droppings, and food scraps have been trampled into it, creating a living floor that is essentially hard-packed compost. You stumble toward the door to let the light in. You have to step over your uncle, who is sleeping by the hearth. He looks old, gray, and withered. He is 35. You push open the heavy wooden door. The light hits you like a physical blow. It is gray and drizzling outside. A fresh air rushes in, carrying the scent of the mud and the midden heap, the trash pile, right outside your front door. But wait, you forgot something. You feel a sharp itch on your scalp. You reach up and scratch. You pull your hand away and see a louse crawling on your fingernail. It is plump and red. It has been feeding well. Here is a quirky, fringed tidbit. The grooming rituals of the medieval period were essentially primate behavior. Nitpicking wasn't a metaphor. It was a daily social activity. Families would sit by the fire in the evening or by the door in the morning light and pick the lice off each other's heads. It was a bonding experience. In fact, giving someone a louse you found on them was sometimes considered a sign of affection, or at least a sign that you were paying attention. You crush the bug between your thumbnails with a satisfying pop. One down, 10,000 to go. You walk back to the hearth to stir the embers. You need to make breakfast. But as you look at the layout of your house animals on one side, people on the other, smoke everywhere, you realize something profound about your existence. You have zero privacy. There are no walls inside the house, no bedrooms, no bathrooms. If you want to have a fight with your spouse, the neighbors hear it. If you want to make a new baby, the children and the goat are watching. If you need to use the chamber pot, you do it in the corner while your mother-in-law stirs the porridge. This brings us to a fierce scholarly debate, the evolution of privacy. Historians like Lewis Mumford and later scholars of domestic architecture argue about when exactly humans decided they needed to be alone. In the medieval period, solitude was often seen as suspicious or dangerous. To be alone was to be an outcast. The great hall or the communal hut was the center of life because survival required huddling. Did medieval people crave privacy and just couldn't afford it? Or did they view our modern obsession with personal space as lonely and bizarre? You, standing half-naked next to a cow while your brother snores 3 feet away, probably just wish for 5 minutes where no one is looking at you. You grab a metal pot. It is encrusted with the remains of last night's pottage. You don't wash it. Water is heavy to carry. You just add more water and put it back on the fire. You are hungry. Your stomach is cramping. It's the gnawing, a constant companion. You need calories to face the brutal labor of the day. You reach for the bread bag hanging from the rafters to keep it away from the rats. You pull out a loaf. It is dark, dense, and hard as a rock. It looks less like food and more like a weapon. You are about to eat. But in the medieval world, eating is a high-risk activity. You aren't just risking a cracked tooth. You are risking a trip to a psychedelic hellscape. The grain stored in the damp, dark corners of the barn has been growing something. A purple fungus. You are about to bite into a slice of madness. You are about to experience breakfast medieval style, where the side effects include convulsions, hallucinations, and gangrene. You hold the loaf in your hand. It feels dense, heavy, and threatening, like a brick wrapped in a crust. This is maslin bread, a mix of wheat and rye, if you're lucky. If you're not lucky, and let's face it, in this timeline, you never are, it is famine bread. You take a knife, which is also your tool for farming, wood carving, and self-defense, and saw a chunk off. It doesn't slice, it splinters. You take a bite. Crunch. The first thing you notice is the resistance. Medieval bread isn't soft. It requires jaw strength that would make a crocodile jealous. You chew, and you feel the grit. Just like the Romans we visited before, your miller uses stone to grind the grain. And just like the Romans, he's sloppy. Every bite contains a little bit of the millstone. Your molars are already ground down to flat, yellow stumps. By the time you're 40, you won't have teeth. You'll have smooth bone ridges. But the grit is the least of your worries. It's the secret ingredients that should concern you. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. When the harvest failed, which it did, constantly, thanks to the Little Ice Age or just bad luck, peasants had to stretch the flour. They didn't have a grocery store to fall back on. So they got creative. They added bean flour, which makes the bread heavy and causes explosive flatulence. They added ground acorns, bitter. In desperate times, they added sawdust, dried moss, or even famine earth, a type of clay rich in minerals, but zero in calories. You are literally eating dirt and wood to trick your stomach into thinking it's full. Your breakfast is essentially a construction material. But today, there is a special seasoning. You swallow the dry, bitter lump. It tastes slightly sweet, in a sickly, cloying way. You dip the next piece in your pottage, a gray, lukewarm soup of oats and onions that has been simmering in the pot for 3 days to soften it. You finish your meal. You feel full. But then, about 20 minutes later, your fingers start to tingle. It feels like ants are crawling under your skin. You rub your hands together, but the sensation grows. It turns into a burning heat, as if you stuck your fingertips into the hearth fire. You try to stand up, but the room tilts. The goat in the corner isn't just staring at you anymore. It's judging you. Its eyes start to glow red. It opens its mouth and speaks to you in the voice of your dead grandfather. The corn is cursed, the goat whispers. You are tripping out of your mind. This is a mainstream historical fact. You have just eaten ergot claviceps purpurea. It is a fungus that grows on rye, especially after a damp, cold winter. It looks like a dark, purple-black spur growing on the ear of grain, often called wolf's tooth. To a hungry peasant, it just looks like more food, so into the grinder it goes. But ergot contains alkaloids that are the chemical precursors to LSD. You are suffering from ergotism. In the Middle Ages, they called it ignis sacer, holy fire, or St. Anthony's fire. The symptoms are horrific. First, the hallucinations. You might see demons, angels, or think you can fly. Entire villages would sometimes succumb to mass hysteria, dancing in the streets until they collapsed from exhaustion, because everyone was eating the same tainted flour. Then comes the fire. The alkaloids constrict your blood vessels, vasoconstriction. Your extremities, fingers, toes, nose, ears stop getting blood. They start to burn with an agonizing, fiery pain. Then they turn black. Then they die. Gangrene sets in. Eventually, the dead parts just fall off. You could literally lose your feet while walking to the field. Imagine a world where your morning toast could cause your hand to rot off and make you think you were a werewolf. That is the culinary reality of the medieval peasant. You shake your head, trying to clear the demons. The goat looks like a goat again, though your fingers are still numb. You decide to wash it down with a drink. You reach for a jug. Do you pour a glass of water? Absolutely not. Are you insane? Water is death. Water is where the cows poop and where the tanner dumps his chemicals. If you drink the water, you get dysentery, cholera, or worms the size of spaghetti. So you drink ale. Small beer or small ale is the Gatorade of the Middle Ages. It has a very low alcohol content, maybe 1 to 2%, just enough to kill the worst of the bacteria, but not enough to get you drunk, hopefully. It is thick, cloudy, and nutritious. It provides a significant portion of your daily calories. You take a swig. It's sour and flat, but it's wet. You wipe your mouth with your sleeve. This brings us to a fierce scholarly debate. The drunken peasant myth. For years, the popular narrative was that medieval people were buzzing with alcohol 24/7 because they drank beer instead of water. But modern historians argue that small beer was hardly intoxicating. You'd have to drink gallons of it to get a buzz. Plus, many sources suggest people did drink water from pristine springs or wells when available. The idea that they only drank booze might be an exaggeration. However, the caloric dependence on ale is undisputed. You are essentially drinking liquid bread because solid bread is trying to kill you. You burp a mix of onion pottage and fermentation. You are technically fueled up. Your stomach is full of heavy, erratic carbs. Your brain is slightly vibrating from the mild ergot poisoning. You look at the door. The sun is technically up, somewhere behind the gray blanket of clouds. It is time to work. You don't have a 9 to 5. You have a dawn to dash, dusk dash, and dash then dash some. You don't have a boss. You have an owner. You grab your tools, a wooden spade, tipped with a tiny strip of precious iron, or maybe a scythe if it's harvest time. You step out of the hut into the mud. You look up at the castle on the hill. It looms over the village, a massive stone reminder of your place in the universe. The person who lives there owns the land you walk on, the house you sleep in, the tools in your hand, and in many ways, the blood in your veins. You are not a citizen. You are not an employee. You are a serf. You trudge toward the domain, lands, the Lord's private fields. You have to work his land before you are allowed to work your own tiny strip to feed your family. You are about to enter this serfdom trap, a legal and economic prison so complete that even your children are born with a life sentence. You tighten your belt, which is just a rope. Your numb fingers struggle with the knot. You hope your foot doesn't fall off before lunch. You step out of your dark, smoky hut, and your foot immediately disappears. It sinks 6 inches deep into a substance that is cold, wet, and relentlessly sticky. This is the medieval mud. It isn't just dirt and water. It is a geological layer of clay, animal waste, rotting straw, and human misery. It sucks at your boots, if you're lucky enough to own leather boots, or your foot wraps, strips of wool tied with rope. Every step is a battle against suction. The commute to work is a lower body workout that would make a modern gym rat weep. You trudge toward the fields. You don't have a nice, square, fenced-in plot of land like a modern farmer. You are entering the open fields. Imagine a massive, sprawling landscape without hedges or fences, divided into 3 huge sectors. These sectors are sliced up into hundreds of long, thin strips, like a pie cut by a maniac. You own a few of these strips, but they aren't next to each other. One is by the stream, one is up the hill, and one is next to the swamp. You spend half your day just walking between your own crops, but you aren't walking to your strips. Not today. Today is Tuesday, and Tuesday belongs to the Lord. You are a serf. Specifically, you are a villain. This sounds like villain, and honestly, that's how the legal system treats you. You are glebai et scripti, bound to the soil. You are not a slave. The Lord can't sell you individually to a guy in the next county, but he can sell the land, and you go with it, like the trees and the barn. You are a feature of the real estate. You reach the domain, the Lord's private land. The bailiff is there. He's the manager. He has a stick. He looks well fed. You hate him with a passion that burns hotter than your hearth fire. Get to the plow, he barks. This is a mainstream historical fact. The medieval economy ran on labor services, also known as corvée. You didn't pay rent with money, mostly because you didn't have any. You paid rent with your body. A typical serf owed the Lord week work, usually 3 days a week, every week, year-round. That means for 50% of your working life, you are farming food you will never eat to feed a guy in a castle who has never held a shovel. And it gets worse. During harvest time, when your own crops are desperate for attention, the Lord can demand boon work extra emergency shifts. If a storm is coming and both fields need harvesting, guess whose wheat gets saved? Not yours. You grab the handles of the plow. It is a heavy moldboard plow. It is a beast of wood and iron designed to rip through the heavy clay soils of northern Europe. It weighs hundreds of pounds. You can't pull this alone. It takes a team of 8 oxen to move it. You don't own 8 oxen. You own half an ox. Technically, you own a share in an ox with your neighbor. So you have to coordinate with 6 other angry, tired neighbors to assemble a team. If Old Man Jenkins' ox is sick, nobody plows. You shout at the oxen. You push. The coulter knife cuts the turf, the share, blade, slices the soil, and a moldboard flips it over. You do this for 10 hours. Your back screams. Your hands blister. You are burning about 4,000 to 5,000 calories a day. Remember that ergot bread breakfast? It's gone. You are running on fumes. And as you work, you calculate the taxes. Oh yes, you don't just pay in labor. You pay in everything. Did you grind your grain into flour? You had to use the Lord's mill. He took a cut, the mulcher. Did you bake your bread? You had to use the Lord's oven. He took a loaf. Did you let your pigs eat acorns in the forest? That's the Lord's forest. You owe him a pig, the panage. Did your daughter get married? You owe him a fine, the merchant, for damaging his property, since she might leave the village. You are being nickeled and dimed to death, except nickels haven't been invented yet, so you are being chickened and egged to death. But the ultimate insult comes at the very end. Here is a quirky, fringe tidbit. Let's say the work finally kills you. You drop dead in the furrow. Your family is devastated. They lose their breadwinner. But the Lord? He sees a payday. It is called the Harriet. This was the death tax of the feudal world. When a serf died, the Lord was legally entitled to the best beast the serf owned. So on the day of your funeral, the bailiff shows up at your hut and takes your best cow or your only horse. He literally takes the engine of your family's survival, just because you had the audacity to die. The priest then takes the second best beast as a mortuary fee. Your grieving widow is left with the third best goat and a grave to dig. You push the plow, heave. You think about running away. If you can escape to a city and stay there for a year and a day without being caught, you become a free man. Statluft matched fry. City air makes you free. But where would you go? The nearest city is 20 miles away. You've never been more than 5 miles from your village. The woods are full of wolves and outlaws, and you have no map. This brings us to a fierce scholarly debate. The passive peasant myth. For a long time, historians viewed serfs as sheep-dumb, passive victims who accepted their lot. But modern social historians argue that peasants were masters of weapons of the weak. They couldn't revolt, knights have swords. You have a stick, so they resisted in other ways. They dragged their feet. They accidentally broke the Lord's tools. They feigned ignorance. Oh, sorry, bailiff, I forgot how to hold the scythe. They stole small amounts of grain. They poached rabbits. Serfdom wasn't a stable hierarchy. It was a constant, low-level Cold War between the owners and the owned. You aren't just working. You are actively engaging in malicious compliance. The sun begins to set. The Angelus bell rings from the church tower. Work is over. You unhitch the oxen. You are covered in mud, sweat, and ox saliva. You are exhausted in a way that modern humans can scarcely comprehend. Your bones feel like they are dissolving. But you can't go home yet. You need supplies. You need salt to preserve the pork, if you ever get any. You need a new metal tip for your spade, because you accidentally broke the Lord's shovel on a rock. You have to go to the town. You wash your face in a trough. Big mistake. Remember the worms. You grab a basket. You start the walk toward the nearest market town. You dream of the city. You imagine paved streets, shops, and civilization. You imagine a place where the mud ends and dignity begins. But you are about to learn a hard lesson. The village is muddy, yes, but the city? The city is liquid. You are about to enter a dense urban environment where sanitation is a foreign word and the street is technically alive. You are about to trade the honest mud of the field for the toxic sludge of the alley. You leave the crushing solitude of the open fields and approach the town gates. You see the stone walls rising up, pennants snapping in the wind and the warm glow of torches. You think finally civilization, paved roads, shops, culture. You step through the gatehouse archway and your optimism instantly dies. You haven't entered a sanctuary. You have entered a sewer with a roof. You look down at your feet. In the village, you walked on mud-honest, organic dirt mixed with a bit of cow manure. Here, the street is paved with muck. Muck is a medieval technical term. It is a black, gelatinous substance composed of mud, rotting straw, animal entrails, vegetable refuse, and human excrement. It is deep. It is active. In some places, it is bubbling. You are attempting the city cesspit slalom. You try to find a dry spot to step. There isn't one. The streets are narrow, winding, and dark. The houses aren't built in neat rows. They lean over the street. The upper stories, the jetties, project outward, sometimes nearly touching the house across the way. This creates a tunnel effect that blocks out the sun and traps the smell. And the smell is ... distinct. It is a rich, fermented blend of ammonia, rotting cabbage, and unwashed humanity. Splash! A drop of warm liquid hits your shoulder. You look up. A shutter slams closed on the second floor. This is a mainstream historical fact. The phrase, "guard is low, look out for the water," was the urban cry of the era. Indoor plumbing did not exist. If you lived on the second floor and had a full chamber pot, you didn't carry it downstairs to the backyard cesspit every time. Especially not at night. You opened the window, checked, briefly, for pedestrians, and chucked it. The street was the drain. Most streets had a central gutter, or kennel, running down the middle, meant to carry rainwater and waste to the nearest river. But often, the kennel just clogged up, creating a stagnant canal of filth right in the middle of the shopping district. You wipe the water off your tunic. You are now part of the ecosystem. To navigate this, you need special equipment. You look down at a passing merchant. He is wearing pattens. These are wooden platforms carved into the shape of a soul, raised up on iron rings or wooden blocks. They are essentially high heels for men, designed to elevate your expensive leather shoes 3 inches above the sludge. You, being a serf, do not have pattens. You are waiting. You trudge forward, trying to reach the market square. You hear a grunt. A massive hairy shape brushes past your leg. It's a pig. In the modern city, a loose pig would trigger a SWAT team response. In the medieval city, pigs are the sanitation department. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. Many medieval cities, like London and Paris, had laws specifically about wandering pigs. The pigs of the St. Anthony monks were the only ones legally allowed to roam free. They wore little bells. But in reality, everyone let their pigs out. Why? Because pigs eat garbage. They were the biological recycling units. They ate the rotting vegetables, the spilled grain, and yes, the feces in the kennel. They kept the trash level down. But they also bit children, tripped horses, and occasionally wandered into houses to eat babies. Court records of pig trials for murder are terrifyingly common. You give the pig a wide berth. It looks tougher than you. You turn a corner and hit the butcher's row or the shambles. The smell changes from latrine to slaughterhouse. In a world without refrigeration, you buy your meat fresh, very fresh. The butchers slaughter the animals right in the back of the shop, or sometimes in the street itself. You see a pile of entrails guts, hooves, and unusable bits heaped in the gutter. The blood flows into the kennel, mixing with the sewage to create a dark purple slurry. The flies are thick enough to inhale. You might wonder, is anyone doing anything about this? This brings us to a fierce scholarly debate, the filth versus fines argument. For a long time, Victorian historians looked at the medieval city and said, these people were disgusting savages who loved living in filth. They painted a picture of universal squalor. But modern historians have dived into the court rolls and found something different. The medievals hated the filth. They were obsessed with it. The records are full of endless fines and ordinances. Fined John the Smith for throwing dead cats in the river. Fined Alice the alewife for piling dung by the church door. The sheer volume of laws suggests that the authorities were constantly fighting a losing battle against waste. They weren't dirty by choice. They were dirty by demographics. The population grew faster than the infrastructure. They were drowning in their own success. You step over a dead cat, sorry, John the Smith. You finally reach the market square. It's a little clearer here. The wind can actually reach the ground, but you feel grimy. The smoke from the hut, the sweat from the plow, and now the splash from the chamber pot have formed a crust on your skin. You feel heavy. You feel out of balance. You see a pole sticking out of a shop front. It is painted with red and white stripes. You think, a barber. I can get a shave. I can get a haircut. I can look presentable. You head toward the shop. You push open the door. You smell something sharp vinegar? No, it's old blood. You see a man sitting in a chair. He isn't getting a trim. He is gripping the armrest so hard his knuckles are white. The barber is holding a small, sharp blade, but he isn't near the man's hair. He is holding the man's arm over a brass bowl. Slice. Dark red blood spurts into the bowl. The man sighs, his eyes rolling back in his head. You have forgotten that in the medieval world, a barber doesn't just cut hair. He cuts you. He is the barber surgeon. And you are about to volunteer for the most popular medical treatment in history. Bloodletting? You wanted to clean up? Well, they're going to clean your blood. Literally. By draining it out of your body until you pass out. You step into the shop, expecting the scent of lavender oil and the snip-snip of scissors. Instead, you are hit with the metallic tong of copper and the sickly sweet smell of dried blood. The barber surgeon looks up. He is wearing an apron that is stiffer than a board, stained with dark, crusted splotches. He smiles, revealing a set of teeth that look like a demolished graveyard. Shave? He asks. Or are you here for the cure? You hesitate. You feel heavy, sluggish. Maybe it was the smoke inhalation. Maybe it was the hallucinogenic bread. Maybe it was the crushing despair of serfdom. You mention that you've been feeling a bit off, a bit hot, a bit heavy in the limbs. The barber nods knowingly. Ah, he says, plethora. You have just been diagnosed. In the medieval medical dictionary, plethora means you have too much of a good thing. Specifically, you have too much blood. This is a mainstream historical fact. Medieval medicine was entirely based on the ancient Greek theory of the four humors, popularized by Galen. The idea was that the human body contained four liquids: blood, hot and moist; phlegm, cold and moist; yellow bile, hot and dry; and black bile, cold and dry. Health was a perfect balance of these four. Sickness wasn't caused by germs or viruses. It was caused by an imbalance. If you were feverish, flushed, or angry, you had too much blood. The solution was simple physics. Open the tap and drain the excess fluid until the balance is restored. It was hydraulic engineering applied to the human body. The barber gestures to the chair. It's a simple wooden stool, stained dark. You sit down. Roll up your sleeve, he commands. He takes a strip of linen bandage and ties it tight around your upper arm. This is the tourniquet. He asks you to grip a wooden pole, the fillet, to make your veins pop. You look at the pole in your hand. It is painted red to hide the blood stains. When the barber isn't using it, he wraps the white bandages around it and hangs it outside to dry. The wind twists the white bandage around the red pole. Congratulations, you are holding the origin of the modern barber pole. That cheerful red and white spiral you see at your local strip mall isn't a candy cane. It is a graphic depiction of a bloody bandage wrapped around a gory stick. The barber picks up his instrument. It isn't a scalpel. It is a fleam. It looks like a small, nasty, multi-bladed pocket knife, or sometimes a spring-loaded trigger mechanism designed to snap a blade into your vein with consistent force. Look away, he suggests. Snap. You feel a sharp, biting sting in the crook of your elbow. It's not a deep pain, but it is a wrong pain. It is the feeling of your interior becoming your exterior. The barber holds a brass bowl under your arm. You hear the rhythmic drip, drip, drip of your life essence hitting the metal. You watch the blood pool. It looks dark. See that? The barber points to a clot. Bad blood. Corrupt humors leaving the body. He is literally stealing your iron and protein when you are already malnourished, but he sells it as a detox. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. The timing of this procedure isn't random. A barber didn't just decide to stab you because it's Tuesday. He likely checked the zodiac man diagram first. Medieval medicine was inextricably linked to astrology. Different star signs ruled different parts of the body. Aries ruled the head, Taurus the neck, Gemini the arms, and so on. If the moon was in Gemini, cutting the arms was forbidden because the blood flow would be uncontrollable. If the moon was in Scorpio, ruling the genitals, you definitely didn't want surgery then. The barber is essentially performing a medical horoscope. If the stars aren't right, you stay sick. As the bowl fills, you start to feel lightheaded. The room spins. The sharp edges of your anxiety soften. The gnawing in your stomach fades into a vague nausea. Feeling better? The barber asks. Oddly, you do. You feel calm. You feel sleepy. This brings us to a fierce scholarly debate. The efficacy paradox. Why did humanity stick with bloodletting for nearly 2,000 years if it killed George Washington and countless others? Did it ever work? Some modern historians and doctors argue that it had a potent placebo effect. The ritual was intense, the provider was confident, and the patient expected a cure. Furthermore, for conditions like extreme hypertension, high blood pressure, or hemochromatosis, iron overload, bleeding might actually have provided temporary relief. Also, inducing fainting, syncope, lowers blood pressure and heart rate, which mimics a calming effect. The patient stopped thrashing around and went to sleep, so the doctor patted himself on the back and said, "Cured." It was bad medicine, but excellent theater. The barber decides you've bled enough, probably about a pint. He unties the tourniquet. He places a pad of unsterilized lint, probably scraped from an old rag, over the wound and wraps it tight. "That will be 2 pennies, he says. You pay him. You stand up, swaying slightly. You are now significantly weaker than when you walked in. Your immune system has just taken a massive hit right before flu season. But as you turn to leave, a sharp pain shoots through your jaw. You wince. You clutch your cheek. The adrenaline of the bloodletting is wearing off, and the dull, throbbing ache in your molar is coming back with a vengeance. The barber notices. His eyes light up. You see, in the medieval world, there are no dentists. There are no orthodontists. There are only 2 people who deal with teeth. The tooth drawer, a traveling charlatan who wears a necklace of human teeth, and the blacksmith barber. Got a rotter? The barber asks, wiping the blood from his fleam. I can take that out for you. No extra charge for the screaming. You recoil. You've heard stories about tooth extraction. You know there is no Novocaine. There is no laughing gas. There is only a pair of iron pliers and a strong man holding you down. But the pain is blinding. It feels like a demon is drilling into your skull. You have no choice. You sit back down in the chair. But this time, The barber calls his apprentice over. "Hold his head," he commands, "and sit on his legs. You are about to transition from the medical clinic to the torture chamber. You are about to experience the blacksmith's dental chair, where the cure is infinitely more traumatic than the disease." You grip the arms of the wooden chair. The wood is slick with the sweat of the previous patient or perhaps their tears. The barber surgeon swaps his delicate bloodletting phlegm for something much more substantial. He reaches into a leather pouch and pulls out a pair of iron forceps. They are heavy, pitted with rust, and look more like they belong in a shipyard than a mouth. "Open wide," he grunts. He doesn't offer you a shot of Novocaine. He doesn't offer you a countdown. He offers you a piece of leather to bite on, but since he needs access to your mouth, that's not really an option. You open your mouth. The apprentice leans his entire body weight onto your legs. He grabs your forehead and pins your skull against the headrest. You are now immobilized. The barber peers inside. He taps the rotting molar with the metal tip of the pliers. You scream. "Ah, yes," he nods sagely. "It's the worm." This is a mainstream historical fact. Medieval people didn't believe in plaque or bacteria. They believed toothaches were caused by a tooth worm, vermis dentium. They thought a tiny worm had burrowed into your tooth and was wriggling around inside the nerve, eating you alive. The hole in your tooth, the cavity, was the worm's front door. To cure the pain, you had to kill the worm. They tried smoking it out with henbane seeds, filling the hole with wax, or chanting spells. But when the worm refused to leave, the only option was eviction. The barber positions the tool. It isn't just a pair of pliers. It's likely a dental pelican. This instrument looks like a claw. The curved part hooks over the top of the tooth, and the flat part rests against your gum. It works on the principle of leverage. The barber isn't going to pull the tooth straight out. He is going to lean on the handle and lever it out sideways, using your own jawbone as the fulcrum. He grunts and pushes. Craw, ache. It isn't a clean pop. It is the sound of bone splintering. The pelican shatters the alveolar bone holding the tooth. The pain is absolute. It is white-hot and all-consuming. It disconnects your brain from reality. You thrash, but the apprentice holds tight. The barber twists. The roots of the tooth, curved and hooked, refuse to let go. He puts a knee on your chest for better leverage. He twists again. With a wet tearing sound, the tooth comes free. A fountain of blood fills your mouth. You choke, cough, and spit a mixture of blood and saliva onto the sawdust floor. The barber holds up the prize. The tooth is black, rotten, and has a long, jagged root. "Got the worm," he says triumphantly. He tosses the tooth into a bucket filled with hundreds of others. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. If you were a pious person, you weren't just screaming during this ordeal. You were praying to Saint Apollonia. She was an early Christian martyr who had all her teeth shattered and pulled out by a mob in Alexandria. Because of her suffering, she became the patron saint of dentistry. Medieval sufferers would wear a necklace of teeth or carry a piece of paper with a prayer to Apollonia on it. You might even see a painting of her in the church, calmly holding a pair of forceps with a tooth in it, looking like the world's most terrifying dental hygienist. The barber hands you a cup of vinegar and salt to rinse your mouth. It burns like fire, but it cauterizes the wound. You sit there, shaking, covered in sweat. You are in shock. This brings us to a fierce scholarly debate. The anesthetic question. Did medieval surgeons really operate on fully conscious patients? Common wisdom says yes. However, there are recipes in medical manuscripts, like the Bald's Leech Book, for a potion called the whale. It contained gall from a boar, hemlock, opium, henbane, and vinegar. It was a potent anesthetic cocktail that could knock a patient out cold. The problem? The dosage was impossible to standardize. Give too little, the patient wakes up screaming. Give too much, The patient stops breathing. Many historians argue that surgeons were too afraid of killing their patients with this sleeping potion to use it regularly. Pain was safer than poison. You stagger out of the shop, clutching your swollen jaw. You have survived the bloodletting and the extraction. You are lighter by a pint of blood and 1 molar. You stumble back into the sunlight of the market square. You just want to go home. You want to crawl back to your smoky hut and sleep for a week. But something is wrong with the town. The noise of the market has died down. The crowds are thinning out. You see a cart rumbling down the street, but it isn't carrying vegetables or manure. It is carrying bodies, wrapped in rough shrouds, stacked like firewood. You look at the house across the street. The door is painted with a large white cross. A guard stands out front, holding a pike. "Keep moving," he shouts at you. Quarantine. You feel a cold dread that has nothing to do with your tooth. You instinctively check your own body. You touch your neck. You touch your armpit. You are looking for a lump, a swelling, a bubo. The barber took your tooth, but he might have breathed something far worse onto you. The great mortality has arrived. The Black Death is here. You stumble away from the quarantined house, your hand still clutching your throbbing, empty gum socket. The pain in your jaw is sharp, but the fear in your gut is sharper. You look around the town square. It isn't just that one house. There are crosses on 3 doors now. The market stalls are overturned. The air is heavy with the smoke of burning juniper and rosemary, which people are burning in the streets to scrub the air. You realize the tooth extraction was the easy part of your day. You have walked into the middle of the apocalypse. You run. You flee the town, desperate to get back to the relative safety of your muddy village. But as you run, you feel a new sensation. It isn't the ergot hallucinations this time. It is a sudden, violent shivering. Your teeth chatter so hard you worry you might crack another one. A wave of heat washes over you, followed instantly by freezing cold. You collapse just inside the door of your hut. Your family stares at you. They don't rush to help. They back away. They know the signs. You reach under your arm. You feel it. A hard, tender lump, about the size of an almond. It is hot to the touch. It pulses with your heartbeat. This is the bubo. You have the Black Death. Specifically, you have the bubonic plague. This is a mainstream historical fact. Between 1347 and 1351, the bacterium Yersinia pestis killed between 30% and 60% of the entire population of Europe. It arrived on Genoese trading ships from the Crimea, carried by fleas living on black rats. When the rats died, the fleas got hungry and jumped to humans. One bite was all it took. The bacterium traveled to your lymph nodes, usually in the groin, armpit, or neck, and began to multiply. The node would swell into a painful black and purple mass called a bubo. If it burst, you might survive. If it didn't, the infection would spread to your blood, septicemic, or lungs, pneumonic, and you were dead within days. You lie on your straw mattress, the delirium setting in. You smell rotting flowers. You see the walls breathing. You scream in pain as the bubo under your arm swells to the size of an apple. It feels like someone is holding a hot coal against your skin. The door creaks open. A figure enters. You expect the iconic plague doctor, the terrifying figure in the waxed leather coat and the bird-beak mask filled with herbs. But actually, you don't see that. That costume won't be invented until the 17th century by Charles Delorme. You are in the medieval plague. Your doctor looks like a normal, terrified man holding a sponge soaked in vinegar over his nose. He stands in the doorway. He refuses to come closer. He uses a long stick to lift your blanket and inspect the swelling. "Bad air," he mutters. "Miasma." He tells you the air in your house is corrupt. He tells you the planetary alignment of Saturn and Jupiter is causing the Earth to exhale poison. He prescribes a cure, and this cure is going to be worse than the disease. Here is a quirky, fringe tidbit: the vicarious cure. Medieval medicine operated on the principle of transference, that disease could be drawn out of the body and into something else. The doctor pulls a live chicken out of a bag. He shaves the feathers off the chicken's butt. Then he instructs your wife to take the bare, pulsating rear end of the live chicken and strap it directly onto your bubo. The belief is that the chicken will absorb the poison. If the chicken dies, which it probably will, from shock or the infection, that's a good sign. They will replace it with another chicken. You are lying there, dying of the worst pandemic in history, with a shaved chicken taped to your armpit. It is undignified. It is absurd. And it is completely useless. The chicken squawks. You groan. The doctor demands payment up front and leaves immediately. You spend the next 3 days in hell. The buboes turn black. Your skin develops dark, gangrenous patches, the tokens of the plague. You cough up blood. But the worst part isn't the pain. It's the isolation. Your neighbors have boarded up their houses. The priest refuses to come to perform the last rites because he is afraid of catching it. The dead are piling up in the streets because the gravediggers are dead too. You hear the tumbrel carts rumbling past, the drivers calling out, "Bring out your dead." It is the sound of society collapsing. This brings us to a fierce scholarly debate: the rat versus human transmission theory. For decades, we blamed the rats, ratus ratus. We learned in school that the plague moved from rat to flea to human. But modern epidemiologists and mathematical modelers have looked at the speed of the Black Death spread. It moved way too fast for rats. Rats are territorial. They don't sprint across Europe in 3 years. Recent studies suggest that human ectoparasites, our own body lice and human fleas, were the primary vectors. We didn't need rats to kill us. We were so dirty and louse-ridden that we spread it to each other. When you hugged your dying brother, the lice jumped from him to you, carrying the bacteria. We were the rats. Miraculously, you don't die. Maybe your bubo burst. Maybe you have a rare genetic mutation, CCR5 delta 32, that gives you resistance. You wake up a week later, weak, dehydrated, and surrounded by silence. You crawl outside. The village is empty. Half the people you knew are gone. The fields are overgrown because there is no one left to plow them. The cows are wandering loose, their udders swollen and unmilked, mooing in pain. You survived. You should be happy. You should feel relieved. But survival has a price. The survivors are looking for someone to blame. They are looking for a scapegoat. Why did God send this pestilence? Who poisoned the wells? Who cursed the village? You walk toward the village well to get water. You are still limping. Your arm is scarred. A group of villagers is gathered there. They stop talking when they see you. They look at your scar. They look at your face, which is pale and gaunt. He survived, one of them whispers. Why did he survive when the priest died? Maybe he made a deal, another says. Maybe he has protection. You realize with a sinking heart that survivor's guilt in the Middle Ages is a psychological condition. It's a criminal accusation. Logic has left the building along with the population. The bailiff steps forward. He didn't die. Of course, he didn't. We need to test the truth, he says. We need to see if God favors you or if the devil owns you. They grab your arms. You are too weak to fight. They drag you toward the churchyard, where a large cauldron is being heated over a fire. You thought the plague was the trial. It wasn't. It was just the jury selection. Now comes the sentencing. You are about to undergo the ordeal. You are about to prove your innocence by plunging your flesh into boiling water. You stand in the center of the churchyard, shivering not from the plague this time, but from pure, unadulterated terror. A crowd is gathered. These are the people you grew up with. You helped them plow. You drank ale with them. But now, fear has turned their faces into stone masks. They want an answer, and they have decided to let physics, or rather, God, provide it. In the center of the circle is a large iron cauldron suspended over a roaring fire. The water inside is rolling, bubbling, and spitting steam into the cold air. The priest stands beside it. He holds a small white stone. He drops it into the water. It sinks to the bottom, swirling through the bubbles. "Retrieve the stone," the priest commands. "If you are innocent, God will protect your flesh. If you are guilty, the scald will reveal your sin." This is the ordeal by boiling water. Judicium aquae ferventis. This is a mainstream historical fact. The medieval legal system didn't rely on CSI, fingerprints, or cross-examination. It relied on judicium Dei, the judgment of God. The logic was terrifyingly simple. God is omnipotent and just. He would never allow an innocent person to be harmed by the elements. Therefore, nature itself acts as the witness. If water rejects you, floating in cold water, you are guilty. If fire burns you, holding a hot iron, you are guilty. If boiling water scalds you, well, it's complicated. You look at the bubbling water. You look at the bailiff with his hand on his sword. You have two choices. Confess to a crime you didn't commit, poisoning the well, consorting with demons, whatever they think you did, and be executed immediately, or put your hand in the pot. You step forward. You roll up your sleeve, exposing the fresh pink scar of the plague bubo. You take a deep breath. You plunge your hand in. The pain is instantaneous and absolute. It feels like 1,000 needles are being driven into your skin simultaneously. Your brain shorts out. You fumble blindly at the bottom of the pot. Your fingertips brush the stone. You grab it. You yank your arm out, splashing boiling water onto your chest. You scream. You drop the stone on the grass. Your hand is lobster red. It is throbbing with a violence that makes your heart stutter. But wait, the trial isn't over. The priest doesn't look at your hand and say, "Oh, it's red. You're guilty." Everyone's hand turns red. Physics is still physics, even in the Middle Ages. He takes a strip of linen cloth. He wraps your scalded hand and arm tightly. He seals it with wax. "We shall wait 3 days," he intones. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. The ordeal wasn't a pass-fail test in the moment. It was a biological waiting game. You were sent home or locked up for 3 days. Then, the priest would unwrap the bandage. If the wound was clean, healing well, no pus, you were innocent. God had intervened to heal you. If the wound was festering, infected, pus-filled, necrotic, you were guilty. God had allowed the corruption to rot you. In a world without antibiotics, sterilization, or clean water, the odds of a third-degree burn, not getting infected, were astronomically low. You were essentially betting your life on your immune system, its ability to fight off staphylococcus while wrapped in a dirty rag. You are dragged to a holding cell, a small wooden shed near the church. You sit there for 3 days. Your hand swells inside the bandage. It throbs. You can feel the heat radiating from it. You can smell the faint, sweet scent of infection starting. This brings us to a fierce scholarly debate. The rationality of the irrational. Why did smart people do this for centuries? Economist Peter Leeson argues that ordeals were actually highly effective separating equilibriums. They were a psychological trick. If you were guilty, you knew God wouldn't protect you, so you wouldn't risk your hand. You would confess and pay a fine if the crime was minor. If you were innocent, you truly believed God would save you, so you demanded the ordeal. The priests knew this. So, when an innocent person stepped up, the priests who controlled the temperature might let the fire die down a bit, or interpret the healing wound generously. A trial was rigged to let innocent people off. It was a divine lie detector test that relied on the placebo effect of faith. But you aren't lucky. The 3 days pass. The crowd gathers again. The priest cuts the wax seal. He unwinds the bandage. The silence is deafening. Your hand is a mess. It is blistered, weeping yellow fluid, and angry red. It looks like, well, like a boiled hand that has been wrapped in a rag for 3 days. The priest grimaces. He points to a small spot of pus. Unclean, he shouts. The corruption manifests. The crowd gasps. They knew it. You survived the plague because you are in league with darkness. You failed the test of the elements. The bailiff steps forward. He doesn't execute you on the spot. That would be too easy. You are a valuable prisoner now. You are a malefactor. You need to be put away until the high court arrives, or until the Lord decides what to do with you. Take him to the castle, the bailiff commands. Put him in the oubliette. You are seized. You are dragged up the hill, past the fields you plowed, past the mud you walked through. You approach the massive stone keep of the castle. It looks majestic from the outside, but you aren't going to the great hall. You aren't going to the solar. You are going down. You are dragged down a spiral staircase, deeper and deeper into the foundation of the fortress. The air gets cold. The smell of damp stone and old mold fills your nose. They bring you to a room with a hole in the floor. A simple, round hole, like a manhole cover. The guard grins. Enjoy the hospitality. They push you. You fall. You hit the ground hard. It is dark. You look up. The hole is 10 feet above your head. It is the only way in and the only way out. You are in the oubliette. The name comes from the French oublier, to forget. You haven't just been imprisoned. You have been erased. You land hard on damp stone. The breath is knocked out of you. You lie there in the pitch black, gasping, waiting for your eyes to adjust. But they don't adjust because there is nothing to adjust to. The only light is a single circular disk of gray high above your head. The murder hole you are just pushed through. You sit up, groaning. Your scalded hand throbs in the darkness. You reach out to feel your surroundings. The floor is slick. It feels slimy. You touch a wall. It curves away from you. You are in a bottle. This is a mainstream historical fact. An oubliette is a specific type of dungeon architecture, often called a bottle dungeon. It is dug into the foundation of a tower. The room is shaped like a flask, narrow at the top, the neck, and widening out at the bottom. This design serves a terrifying dual purpose. First, it is structurally sound for the tower above. Second, it makes escape physically impossible. Even if you were Spider-Man, you couldn't climb out because the walls slope inward as they go up. You are trapped in a stone stomach. You crawl around the perimeter. It takes you about 10 paces to circle your world. The air is stagnant. It smells of old mold, wet earth, and something sharper ammonia. Your hand brushes against something on the floor. It is hard. It is brittle. It is a bone. You recoil. You aren't the first guest. You realize the true horror of the name. Oubliette. From the French oublier, to forget. In a normal dungeon, you might be held for ransom. You might be interrogated. You might have a trial. Here, the punishment isn't torture. It is administration. They didn't throw you down here to hurt you. They threw you down here to file you away and lose the paperwork. You are a loose end that has been tied off. You look up at the circle of light. It is your clock, your calendar, and your God. You watch it fade from gray to black as night falls. You wait for food. Surely they have to feed you. Eventually, the hatch opens. A face appears, a silhouette against a torch. A basket is lowered on a rope. You scramble for it. Inside, there is a crust of bread and a jug of water. That'll be a farthing, the voice calls down. You freeze. No money, no meat tomorrow, the voice says cheerfully. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. Medieval prisons were privatized businesses. The jailer, often called the constable or the porter, didn't get a salary to take care of you. He paid the king for the right to run the jail. and he made his profit by charging the prisoners. You had to pay for your food. You had to pay for your bedding. You even had to pay a fee to have your irons removed. Suit of irons fees? If you were a rich knight, you lived in a tower suite with wine and servants. If you were a broke peasant in the oubliette, you starved. The jailer isn't being cruel. He's just protecting his margins. You are a non-paying customer in a very exclusive hotel. You eat the bread in the dark. It tastes like despair. You listen to the scuttling sounds in the corners. The rats are here. They are the only sanitation crew. They clean up the crumbs, and eventually, they clean up the guests. You try to sleep, but the floor is wet. This brings us to a fierce scholarly debate, the dungeon versus latrine controversy. When Victorian antiquarians like Vieux-le-Duc explored medieval castles, they labeled every deep, dark basement a dungeon or oubliette because it fit their romantic, Gothic imagination. But modern archaeologists, looking at the soil composition in these pits, often find high concentrations of phosphate. This suggests that many of these oubliettes were actually just cesspits, toilets, or storage cisterns. It is very possible that you aren't in a torture chamber. You are sitting in the castle's septic tank, or perhaps a grain silo. To the prisoner, the distinction is academic. Whether you are trapped in a toilet or a prison, you are still at the bottom of a wet hole. Days pass, or maybe weeks. You lose track. The routine is the same. The light wakes you. The rats watch you. The jailer demands money you don't have. You get weaker. Your scalded hand is now a numb, throbbing weight at the end of your arm. You start to hallucinate again. Not the ergot fire this time, but the madness of sensory deprivation. You talk to the rats. You name them. The big one is the bailiff. The small one is the priest. But then, the routine breaks. You wake up, but not to the light. You wake up to a sound. THUD. The entire floor vibrates. Dust sifts down from the ceiling hatch. THUD. It is a rhythmic, heavy pounding. It feels like a giant is hitting the castle with a hammer. The hatch opens. But no basket comes down. No face appears. Instead, you hear shouting. You hear the clatter of boots running on stone. You hear the distinct, metallic shing of swords being drawn. To the walls, someone screams. They're breaching the gate. You realize what is happening. The lord who threw you in here has enemies. Maybe a rival baron. Maybe the king. Maybe a peasant revolt. Unlikely. But you can dream. The castle is under siege. You feel a surge of hope. If the castle falls, maybe the new management will let you out. Maybe the wall will collapse and free you. But then the reality sinks in. A siege means the castle is sealed. No food goes in. No food comes out. And if the garrison is starving, do you think they are going to lower a basket of bread to the guy in the hole? You are at the bottom of the food chain, literally and metaphorically. The vibrations get stronger. A massive crash echoes from above a catapult stone, hitting the tower. A piece of masonry falls through the hatch and shatters on the floor next to you. You curl into a ball. You are trapped in a stone box, while two armies try to destroy the building you are inside. You are about to experience the siege diet, but you won't be eating rats. You will be wishing you had rats to eat. Because up above, the defenders are running out of supplies, and they are getting desperate. And when the defenders get desperate, the war gets dirty. You look up at the hatch one last time. It slams shut. The lock clicks. You are alone in the dark. And the war is just beginning. The hatch above your head scrapes open. A rope drops down. "Get up here," a voice screams. Every hand to the walls. You are hauled up into the light, blinking like a mole. The castle courtyard is unrecognizable. The majestic fortress you saw months ago is now a ruin. The stables are burned. The ground is littered with shattered stone. And the people ... The people look like skeletons draped in mail. You haven't been rescued. You have been drafted. The garrison has taken heavy casualties, and now even the prisoners are being handed spears and told to hold the line. You are handed a leather helmet and pushed toward the battlements. But as you run, your stomach cramps so hard you almost double over. You realize the real enemy isn't outside the walls. It's inside your gut. You are starving. This is a mainstream historical fact. Medieval warfare wasn't about glorious charges. It was about logistics. Most campaigns were sieges. The attacker didn't want to storm the walls, suicide. They wanted to starve you out. A siege was a slow-motion contest of who ran out of calories first. The average siege lasted months. The siege of Chateau Galliard lasted 6 months. The siege of Calais lasted nearly a year. You are currently in month 4. The grain ran out in month 2. The horses were eaten in month 3. Now, you are on the siege diet. You look at the soldier next to you. He is chewing on something dark and tough. It isn't jerky. It is a piece of his own belt. When the meat runs out, you boil the leather. You boil your boots. You boil the scabbards. You try to extract the animal collagen from the tanned hide just to keep your organs functioning. It tastes like tannins and feet, and it provides almost zero nutrition, but it gives your jaw something to do. You reach the wall. You look over the crenellations. The enemy camp surrounds you, a sea of tents and fires. And in the center, you see it. The war wolf, a massive trebuchet. It is a timber beast, 50 feet tall. A counterweight is a box filled with tons of lead and rock. You watch the arm swing up. Whoosh! A projectile arcs through the sky, but it isn't a stone. It's soft. It's floppy. Splat! It hits the courtyard behind you. The smell hits you instantly. It is a dead horse. A bloated, rotting, disease-ridden horse carcass. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. Biological warfare isn't a modern invention. In 1346, during the siege of Kaffa, the Mongol army catapulted the bodies of their own plague victims over the city walls. They were literally throwing the Black Death at their enemies. In your siege, they are throwing offal, dead animals, and sometimes human heads. The goal isn't to knock down the wall. It's to spread dysentery and terror. The psychological toll of having your friend's head thrown back at you is a weapon more effective than any arrow. You gag, but your stomach is too empty to vomit. You look down into the dry moat. You see huddled shapes. Women, children, old men. They are crying. They are begging for food from the walls and begging for mercy from the enemy camp. This brings us to a fierce scholarly debate. The useless mouths, bouches and noodles. What does a commander do when the food runs low? The chivalric code says you protect the weak. The military logic says you dump them. In the siege of Chateau Galliard, 1203 to 1204, King Philip Augustus refused to let the civilians pass through his lines, and the castle commander kicked them out to save food. Hundreds of civilians were trapped in the winter cold between the castle walls and the enemy trenches. They starved to death in no man's land while both sides watched. Historians argue about who was the bigger war criminal, the commander who expelled them or the king who blocked them. Either way, chivalry died in that ditch. You look away. You can't help them. You are about to become a useless mouth yourself. Suddenly, a massive boom shakes the stone beneath your feet. The trebuchet has switched back to rocks. A section of the curtain wall to your left explodes. Dust billows up. Breach! The captain screams. Plug the breach. You are pushed into the cloud of dust. You see enemy soldiers pouring through the rubble. They are fresh. They are fed. You are a walking skeleton with a boiled belt in your stomach. You make a split-second decision. You don't fight. You run. In the chaos of the breach, the perimeter has collapsed. The enemy is focused on the keep. You spot a drainage culvert, a small, grate-covered hole leading out to the moat. The grate has been blasted loose. You slide into the muck. You crawl through the filth, familiar territory by now. You emerge in the ditch, hidden by the smoke of the battle. You scramble up the bank. You run past the enemy tents, dodging the sentries who are too busy looting the castle to notice one ragged scarecrow slipping away. You reach the tree line. You don't stop. You run until your lungs burn and your legs give out. You are out. You are free. You have escaped the smoke, the plague, the dungeon, and the siege. You are in the king's forest. It is quiet. It is green. But you have made a terrible mistake. You have left the frying pan of the castle for the fire of the woods. You are traveling alone. You have no weapons. You have no money. And you are walking through the territory of the outlaws. You think of Robin Hood, a dashing hero who steals from the rich to give to the poor. Forget that. You are about to meet the real highwaymen, and they don't give to the poor. They slit the poor's throat for a pair of boots. You stumble through the undergrowth, your tunic snagging on brambles. You have escaped the siege, but you have entered a jurisdiction that is, in many ways, more dangerous than the battlefield. You are in the king's forest. Now, when you hear king's forest, you probably imagine a nice nature preserve where the king goes glamping. But in the medieval world, forest is a legal term, not a botanical one. It means land reserved for the king's hunting. It covers vast swaths of the country, and the laws here are draconian. If you chop down a tree to warm your freezing body, punishment. If you kill a deer to feed your starving stomach, punishment. If you carry a bow and arrow, punishment. But the king's laws are the least of your worries. The king is far away in London or Paris. The people who are actually here, hiding in the green shadows, are much closer. You hear a twig snap. You freeze. You think of Robin Hood. You think of a dashing rogue in Lincoln Green who will offer you a leg of venison and a joke about the sheriff. Suddenly, 3 men step out from behind the oaks. They aren't wearing clean green tights. They are wearing rusted chainmail scavenged from corpses. Their faces are scarred. They smell like unwashed dogs and old blood. One of them is holding a club with a nail through it. Your money or your life, the leader grunts. Although, in this economy, he'll probably take both just to be safe. This is a mainstream historical fact. Travel in the Middle Ages was suicidal. Unless you were a pilgrim in a large group or a merchant with hired guards, you did not leave your village. The king's peace technically protected the highways, but there was no police force. There was only the hue and cry. If you were robbed, you had to scream, and the locals were legally required to chase the thief. But in the deep woods, no one hears you scream. These men aren't freedom fighters. They are outlaws. Legally, an outlaw is a caput lupinum wolf's head. It means they are no longer human in the eyes of the law. They have been stripped of all rights. Anyone can kill them on sight without penalty. Because they are already dead to society, they have nothing to lose. They are desperate, violent, and incredibly dangerous. You hold up your empty hands. You try to explain you are a starving serf escaping a siege. The leader steps closer. He squints at you. He sees your boiled leather belt. He sees your shoes. "Nice boots," he says. This brings us to a fierce scholarly debate, the social bandit theory. Historian Eric Hobsbawm famously argued that outlaws like Robin Hood were social bandits, peasant heroes resisting oppression. But modern researchers looking at the cork rolls of the 14th century have found the Cotterell Gang and the Falval Gang. These weren't peasants. They were the younger sons of gentry, fallen knights, and corrupt priests. They didn't rob the rich to give to the poor. They robbed everyone to give to themselves. They kidnapped judges, extorted villages, and terrorized the countryside. The Merry Men were essentially a medieval mafia. You are about to be beaten to death for a pair of worn-out boots. But suddenly, a low, guttural growl erupts from the darkness behind the bandits. The men freeze. The horses they have tethered nearby start to scream and rear. It isn't a wolf's head this time. It is an actual wolf. A pack of gray shapes materializes from the mist. Their eyes reflect the moonlight. They are gaunt, rib-thin, and hunting. Here's a quirky fringe tidbit. We tend to think of the big bad wolf as a fairy tale. In the Middle Ages, it was a daily reality. The winter of 1450 was so cold that a pack of hungry wolves actually entered the city of Paris through a breach in the walls and ate 40 people in the streets. They were led by a reddish wolf nicknamed Cortod, Bobtail. Medieval people lived in constant terror of being eaten alive. The forest wasn't a playground. It was a predator-rich environment. The bandits panic. The leader swings his club, the nearest wolf. The pack attacks. It is a chaotic swirl of fur, teeth, and rusty iron. You don't wait to see who wins. You use the distraction to run. You scramble up a rocky slope, your breath tearing at your throat. You hear the screams of the bandits fading behind you, replaced by the wet sounds of feeding. You have survived the humans and the animals, but only by pure luck. You crest the ridge. You see a light in the distance. A small, lonely farmhouse in a clearing. You stagger toward it. You need shelter. You need to hide from the wolves. But as you get closer, you hear a sound coming from the cottage that chills you more than the howl of the wolf. It is a scream, a human scream, long, agonizing, and rhythmic. You creep up to the window and peek inside. You see a scene of blood, steam, and terror. You thought the battlefield was the most dangerous place in the medieval world? You were wrong. The most dangerous battlefield is the birthing bed. You are about to witness the childbirth roulette. You are about to see why life expectancy is so low, not just because people die young, but because so many never make it out of the room they were born in. You press your face against the cold, dirty glass of the farmhouse window, or more likely, you peer through a gap in the oiled parchment stretched over the frame. The scream cuts through the night again, louder this time, followed by a flurry of anxious voices. Inside, the room is lit by a dozen tallow candles. The air is thick with steam. A fire is roaring in the hearth, making the small space a sauna. In the center of the room, a woman is gripping the ropes of a birthing chair, her face contorted in agony. You are witnessing the most dangerous battlefield in the medieval world. No sword, no plague, and no wolf pack claims as many lives as this bed. This is a mainstream historical fact. Maternal and infant mortality in the Middle Ages was catastrophic. Statistics are hard to pin down because births weren't always recorded, but estimates suggest that 1 in 3 babies died before the age of 5, and perhaps 1 in 20 women died in childbirth. If a woman had 10 pregnancies, which was common, her cumulative risk of dying in labor was terrifyingly high. It was the great leveler. Queens died of it just as often as serfs. In a world without antibiotics, a C-section was a death sentence, usually performed only after the mother had already died to save the soul of the infant. Even a minor tear could lead to childbed fever, puerperal fever, a bacterial infection that would kill the mother days later. You watch the scene. There are no men in the room. This is a female domain. The father is pacing outside or drinking at the tavern. The room is filled with gossips, a term that originally meant godsibs, god-siblings, the close female friends and relatives invited to witness the birth. They are bustling around, but they aren't sterilizing instruments. They are boiling water. Good, but they are also closing every window and stuffing the cracks with cloth. Why? To keep the drafts out? No, to keep the fairies out. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. Medieval obstetrics was a mix of practical experience and absolute magical thinking. They believed that demons and changelings were trying to snatch the unbaptized baby. So, the lying-in chamber was sealed tight. But if the labor stalled, if the baby wouldn't come, the remedies got weird. They might open all the cupboards and unlock every box in the house. Sympathetic magic. Open the box, open the womb. If that didn't work, they might bring in a relic. Wealthy monasteries rented out birthing girls, belts supposedly worn by the Virgin Mary or a saint that were draped over the mother's belly. If you were poor, you might drink water that had been washed over a magic stone, Aetides or eagle stone. You are watching a medical procedure that relies heavily on whether or not a rock has touched a saint's shin bone. The woman screams again. "It's stuck," one of the midwives shouts. This is the nightmare scenario. A breech birth or a shoulder dystocia. In 1350, there are no forceps. There is no vacuum extraction. There is only the midwife's hands and brute force. You watch the midwife, an older woman with sleeves rolled up, grease her hands with pork fat, hopefully fresh. She reaches in. She is trying to turn the baby. This brings us to a fierce scholarly debate, the midwife versus doctor controversy. For centuries later, male physicians painted medieval midwives as superstitious, incompetent hags who killed babies. This narrative justified the male takeover of obstetrics in the 18th century. But modern historians examining the records argue that medieval midwives were actually highly skilled professionals. They had an apprenticeship system. They knew techniques for turning babies, version, that were lost when male doctors took over. In fact, when male doctors did take over, maternal mortality often spiked because the doctors came straight from the autopsy room without washing their hands, spreading sepsis. The ignorant midwife might have been the safest pair of hands in Europe. The tension in the room is palpable. The mother is fading. The gossips are praying loudly to Saint Margaret, the patron saint of childbirth, who famously burst out of a dragon's stomach, a very graphic metaphor for birth. Suddenly, a cry, a thin, reedy wail. The midwife holds up a small, bloody bundle. The room erupts in cheers. The mother collapses back, exhausted but alive. But the danger isn't over. The midwife cuts the cord. She washes the baby. And then she does something strange. She rubs the baby with salt, and then she molds its head. She presses the soft skull plates, shaping the head to look rounder, more noble. Then she swaddles the infant so tightly it looks like a log. Medieval people believed that if you didn't swaddle a baby's limbs straight, it would grow up to walk on all fours like an animal. You step back from the window, relieved. Life has found a way. But as you step back, your foot lands on a dry twig. Crack! Inside the house, the celebration stops instantly. The women freeze. What was that? The midwife hisses. A demon? A watcher? One of the gossips rushes to the window. She throws open the shutter. You are standing there in the moonlight. You look like a nightmare. You are emaciated from the siege. You are covered in the mud of the forest. Your clothes are rags. You have the wild eyes of a person who has eaten boiled leather. To a modern person, you look like a refugee. To a medieval peasant, you look like a servant of the devil. "It's a witch!" the woman screams. He was cursing the milk. He was looking with the evil eye. You turn to run, but you are weak. The door of the farmhouse bursts open. It isn't just the women now. The men have arrived from the barn. They have pitchforks. They have fear. And remember, the neighbor's cow did die yesterday, and the butter didn't churn this morning, and the weather has been bad. They needed a reason. They needed a cause. And now they have found you. You are tackled into the mud. You are dragged toward the village. You aren't going to the oubliette this time. That was for political prisoners. You are going to the ecclesiastical court, or worse, the mob tribunal. You are about to face the witchcraft accusation. You are about to learn that in a world without science, coincidence is a capital crime. You are dragged through the mud, your heels scraping against the roots and rocks of the forest floor. The mob isn't shouting anymore. They are chanting. It is a low rhythmic murmur of Latin prayers mixed with local curses. You have been upgraded from starving trespasser to enemy of God. They haul you into the village square or perhaps the nave of the church. A tribunal has been hastily assembled. It consists of the local priest, who looks exhausted from burying plague victims, the bailiff, who hates you, and a few respected elders who are convinced you are the reason their beer turned sour last Tuesday. You are about to face a witchcraft accusation. Now, you might be thinking of the Salem witch trials or the burning times of the 17th century. But this is the Middle Ages. Things are confused. This is a mainstream historical fact. In the High Middle Ages, the Church's official stance, based on the canon episcopi, was actually that witches didn't exist. To believe that a human could fly or change the weather was considered a pagan superstition. If you accused your neighbor of being a witch, the priest might fine you for being superstitious. However, as we moved into the 14th century, with the famine, the plague, and the social collapse, the mood shifted. The charge changed from delusion to maleficium, the use of magic to cause physical harm. If a child died, crops failed, or a cow went dry, someone had to be blamed. And since you just peered through a window looking like a demon, that someone is you. He looked at the babe. The midwife screams, with the evil eye, "My butter won't churn." A farmer yells, "He cursed the cream." You try to defend yourself. You try to explain about the siege, the plague, the bandits. But logic has no power here. You are in a universe governed by magical causality. The priest steps forward. He holds a long, sharp needle, a bodkin. "We must search for the mark," he announces. You are stripped naked in front of the entire village. The humiliation is total. They are looking for the stigma diaboli, the devil's mark. This was believed to be a spot on the body where the devil had licked or clawed the witch to seal their pact. The defining feature of the mark? It cannot feel pain, and it does not bleed. The priest grabs your arm. He sees the scar from the bubonic plague, or perhaps the burn mark from the boiling water trial. Here, he points. He jams the needle into the scar tissue. Because it is scar tissue, the nerves are dead. You don't flinch. You don't bleed. The devil's teat. The crowd gasps. He feeds his familiars with his own blood. You stare at the needle sticking out of your arm. You have just been convicted by dermatology. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. The swimming test, ducking stool, it's all the movie time, but the pricking was the professional standard. In later centuries, there were actually professional prickers who traveled from town to town, paid by the witch. They used retractable needles, like a stage prop knife, that retracted into the handle when pressed against the skin. They would stab the accused, show no blood, and collect their fee. You are the victim of a magic trick designed to kill you. But even without a fake needle, any mole, wart, or scar could be interpreted as a nipple for a demon imp. The bailiff nods. The evidence is irrefutable. You are a maleficus. This brings us to a fierce scholarly debate, the Great Witch Hunt timeline. Many people assume the Middle Ages were the peak of witch burning. Actually, the craze, where tens of thousands were executed, was a phenomenon of the early modern period, 1550 to 1650, the Renaissance and the Reformation. The medieval period was relatively quiet on the witch-burning front compared to the 17th century. In the 1300s, you were more likely to be burned for being a heretic, wrong religion, than a witch. However, the legal machinery was being built right now. The Inquisition was shifting its focus from cathars to sorcerers. You are caught in the ugly transition period where folk magic is becoming satanic conspiracy. The sentence is passed. You are to be burned. Not immediately. They need to build the pyre. They throw you into a holding cell. It isn't the oubliette this time. It is the church crypt. You sit in the dark, surrounded by the bones of the village ancestors. You are going to die. That is a certainty. You have survived smoke, starvation, plague, and war, only to be killed by a needle and a superstition. But as the adrenaline fades, a deeper, colder fear settles into your bones. It isn't the fear of the fire. The fire will hurt, yes, but it will be over in minutes. The real terror is what comes after the fire. You see, in the modern world, death is the end. Lights out. But in your world, death is just the waiting room. You have been excommunicated. You have been branded a servant of the devil. This means you aren't just losing your life. You are losing your soul. You look at the shadows in the crypt. They seem to move. You remember the sermons. You remember the paintings on the church walls, the doom paintings, demons with pitchforks, boiling lakes of sulfur, eternal, unending conscious torture. You start to hyperventilate. The anxiety of the medieval mind isn't about paying the mortgage or failing a test. It is the crushing, absolute certainty that a literal monster is waiting to drag you into a literal pit of fire forever. You are about to experience eternal damnation anxiety. You are about to spend your final night on Earth wrestling with the psychological torture that kept an entire continent obedient for 1,000 years. You sit on the cold stone floor of the crypt, your back against a sarcophagus. Above you, the village sleeps. But you are wide awake. You are shivering, not from the cold, but from a psychological frost that goes deeper than the bone. You are going to die tomorrow. But in the medieval mind, death is the easy part. The fire is just a doorway. You look at the wall of the crypt. In the flickering light of a stolen candle, you see a faded fresco. It is a doom painting. This is a mainstream historical fact. Medieval churches were covered in graphic art, specifically the Last Judgment. Because most people were illiterate, the walls were the Bible, and the most prominent chapter was hell. Above the chancel arch in almost every parish church was a mural depicting the Hellmouth, a literal giant mouth of a beast swallowing sinners. You grew up staring at this every Sunday. You saw demons with iron hooks dragging naked people into boiling cauldrons. You saw the lustful being castrated, the gluttons force-fed toads, and the liars having their tongues pulled out. To you, hell isn't a vague theological concept. It is a geographic location with a specific torture schedule. And because you have been accused of witchcraft, you aren't just going to purgatory, the waiting room. You are going straight to the basement. You close your eyes, but you can still see the demons. They are waiting for you. You feel a crushing weight on your chest. This is the ars moriendi, the art of dying. A good death in the Middle Ages meant dying in bed, surrounded by family, having confessed your sins, and received the last rites, viaticum. It was a carefully choreographed ritual to ensure your paperwork was in order before you met the CEO. You are facing a bad death. Sudden, violent, unshriven, excommunicated. You are hitting the spiritual highway without a passport. You start to bargain. You try to do the math. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. Medieval salvation was often treated like accounting. Sin was debt, prayer was currency. The church sold indulgences certificates that reduced your time in purgatory by a specific amount. You could literally buy 300 days off for a few pennies. Wealthy people set up chantries, paying priests to pray for their souls 24/7 after they died, effectively trying to bribe the jury from beyond the grave. King Henry VII mandated that 10,000 masses be said for his soul. You have 0 pennies. You have 0 masses. You are spiritually bankrupt. You calculate your sins, the anger at the Lord, the stolen bread, the despair. The math is not looking good. You are looking at an eternity of being poked with sharp sticks. You rock back and forth. The terror is absolute. It is a panic attack that lasts for hours. This brings us to a fierce scholarly debate, the thesis of fear. Historian Jean Delamot argued that Western Christianity from the 14th to 17th centuries was a pastoral of fear, A culture traumatized by plague and war, living in constant terror of sin and Satan. They saw demons everywhere, in the storm, in the milk, churn, in the cat. But other scholars, like Eamon Duffy, argue that this view is too modern. They say medieval people found immense comfort in the rituals, the saints, and the community of the church. They argue that the focus on hell was balanced by a deep trust in mercy. But sitting here in the dark, accused of being a wizard, you are definitely on Team Delamo. You don't feel comforted. You feel hunted. The sun rises. The door to the crypt creaks open. You brace yourself. You wait for the bailiff to drag you to the stake. But instead, the bailiff throws a shovel at your feet. "Get up," he grunts. "Execution is cancelled." You blink. Cancelled? Lord's orders. He spits. "The plague took too many. We're short on reapers. You can burn later. Today, you harvest." You are stunned. You haven't been pardoned. You have just been repurposed. You are too valuable as a biological machine to waste as fuel. The economic reality of the labor shortage has trumped the spiritual panic. You stumble out of the crypt. The sun is bright. The air smells of harvest dust and dry wheat. You are alive. But as you reach down to pick up the shovel, your back locks up. A sharp, grinding pain shoots down your spine. Your knees crack audibly. You try to straighten up, but you can't. You are permanently stooped. You look at your reflection in a rain barrel. You see a face that is lined like a roadmap of misery. Your teeth are gone, thanks to the blacksmith. Your skin is pockmarked, thanks to the smallpox you forgot to mention. Your hair is gray and thinning. You have a scar on your neck, a burn on your hand, and a wheeze in your lung. You look like you are 70 years old. You ask the bailiff the date. You do the mental math. You were born in the year of the Great Famine. That was ... 35 years ago. You are 35. You have reached the end of the line. You have survived childhood, the fields, the city, the plague, the war, and the witch trial. You are a statistical anomaly. You are an elder, but your body is finished. You are about to experience the final indignity of the medieval timeline. You are about to enter old age before you even have a midlife crisis. You lean on your shovel, breathing hard. The air wheezes in and out of your smoke-damaged lungs like a broken accordion. You look at your hands. They are gnarled, the knuckles swollen to the size of walnuts. They are the hands of a man who has wrestled with the earth for 7 decades. But you aren't 70. You are 35. In the modern world, 35 is the prime of life. You are thinking about buying a house, maybe starting a yoga class. In the medieval world, if you are a serf who has survived the plague and the famine, 35 is the beginning of the end. You are a biological machine that has exceeded its warranty. You look across the field at your son. He is 12. He is already taking the heavy end of the plow. He looks at you not with pity, but with impatience. He is waiting for you to get out of the way. This is a mainstream historical fact. We often hear that the average life expectancy in the Middle Ages was 35. This is a statistical truth, but a biological lie. It is skewed heavily by the massive infant mortality rate. Remember the 50% who died before age 5? If you survived childhood, you had a decent chance of living to 50 or even 60. However, for the laboring class, living and functioning were 2 different things. A lifetime of heavy lifting, malnutrition, and untreated bone fractures meant that by your mid-30s, your body was wrecked. You had premature aging. Your spine was fused, your teeth were gone, and your joints were bone on bone. You weren't dead, but you were definitely spent. You tried to lift a heavy sack of grain. Your back gives out. You drop it in the mud. Your son sighs. The bailiff glares. You realize you are becoming a liability. If you can't work the land, you can't pay the rent. If you can't pay the rent, the Lord will evict you. You need a plan. You need to retire. But there is no Social Security. There are no nursing homes. There is only the contract. You walk back to the village, limping heavily. You go to the manor court. You are about to sign the most important document of your life. You are going to sign a maintenance agreement with your own son. Here is a quirky, fringe tidbit. Medieval peasants didn't trust their kids to take care of them out of the goodness of their hearts. They knew that in a starvation economy, grandma was just another mouth to feed. So they formalized it. The cork rolls are full of these retirement contracts. You officially surrender your land and your house to your son. In exchange, he is legally bound to provide you with specific items until you die. A typical contract might specify a seat by the fire, 1 robe per year, a loaf of bread daily, and access to the back room. It was a prenup for intergenerational living. If your son stopped feeding you, you could take him to court and get your farm back. It was cold, legalistic, and absolutely necessary. You sign the paper, or rather, make your mark. You hand over the spade. You hand over the ox. You are now a sojourner, a guest in your own home. You sit on the bench by the door. The sun is setting. You watch the village activity. You see the young men flirting by the well. You see the women rushing to the bakery. You see the cycle repeating. This brings us to a fierce scholarly debate. The stages of life theory. Did medieval people view old age as a tragedy or a triumph? Philosophers like Augustine divided life into stages. Ages of man, where the final stage, senectus, was a time of spiritual reflection and wisdom. They idealized the white-haired sage, but social historians looking at the literature, like Chaucer's Reeve, find a different picture. Old people were often mocked as greedy, lustful, and physically repulsive. They were seen as dry and cold, slowly turning into corpses while still alive. It wasn't a time of respect. It was a time of irrelevance. You were a piece of furniture that ate. You pull your thin wool blanket tighter. You feel the chill of the evening. You think back on your life. You remember the smell of the smoke in the morning. You remember the taste of the ergot bread. You remember the weight of the plow. You remember the terror of the plague. You remember the pain of the boiling water. It has been a hard road. A brutal, filthy, painful road. But you are still here. You look at your hand, the one with the burn scar. You flex the stiff fingers. You survived. You beat the odds. You navigated the worst time to be alive in human history, and you are still breathing. For now, the sun dips below the horizon. The church bell rings the Angelus. The workers are coming home. You close your eyes. You are tired. Not the tired of a long day, but the deep, marrow-deep exhaustion of a life spent fighting gravity and entropy. You listen to the wind in the thatch. It sounds like a whisper. Rest, it says. The work is done. You let your head tip back against the wattle and daub wall. The darkness of the hut feels familiar. It feels like the womb or the tomb. The distinction doesn't matter anymore. You let go. You let the plow drop from your mind. You let the fear of the helmet fade. You drift into the gray, quiet space between the years. You have walked the mud. You have paid the toll. You are done.